Thank you very much, sir. We have resumed and we're going to hear from Mr. Rollason.
Yes, fine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rollason. I'm the usher. I'm going to take you through the affirmation. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Please can you repeat after me? I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
to be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you give your full name, please?
Yeah, Trevor Rollason.
Mr. Rollason, thank you very much for joining us today, and apologies for the difficulties with transporting the equipment to you. We're grateful that you've joined us from abroad today. Do you have in front of you a copy of your witness statement dated the 6th of January?
Yeah.
Can you look at the final page of that document, page 25 of 26? It has there a statement of truth. Is that your signature at the bottom?
My signature. Yeah.
And can you confirm that that statement dated the 6th of January is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you very much. For the purpose of the transcript, the statement is WITN 052401000. I'm going to start today, Mr. Rollason, with your background. You joined the post office straight from school in 1974, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
And you worked as a counter clerk and then acting branch manager?
Yep, I did.
And you held various roles before being promoted to the post office headquarters.
That's correct.
And at the headquarters, you again held various roles, such as area and counter manager in Basildon.
No, that wasn't the headquarters. That was at the district office.
Was that before?
At the headquarters, I did operational efficiency, industrial engineering work, and then I was promoted to area manager at the Colchester district office.
Thank you. And did, in those early experiences, to what extent were you familiar with cash account balancing and using pre-Horizon systems?
Very familiar. Very familiar.
And how familiar were others who worked within the headquarters with those processes, such as the management?
Sorry, you're getting me slightly confused. You're talking about headquarters or you're talking about the Horizon project?
So when you were working on the Horizon project, you have said that you were familiar with cash account balancing and using pre-Horizon systems because of your previous experiences. To what extent had those who you worked with, particularly in management roles, familiar with things like cash account balancing and using the pre-Horizon systems?
Oh, are you talking about my immediate managers or the staff that I had worked for me?
Well, let's start with your immediate managers.
My immediate managers were ex-district managers, regional managers, probably direct graduate entrants, but they would have known the business reasonably well, I would have thought.
And who was your direct manager?
Douglas Craig.
And from your experience further up in the business, within the post office, so the management level, senior management level of the post office, how familiar from your own experiences were they with those processes?
I would have thought certainly Bruce McNiven would have known most of those processes. I don't know whether Dave Miller would have had the detail that we had, but he would certainly have been aware of how a sub-office works. Whether he knew the detail of the cash account, I couldn't say for sure. Thank
you. The most relevant role that you held for the purposes of today was the National Horizon Training Manager from 1995. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So that's quite early on in the project. Looking at contemporaneous documents, it seems as though you were at least receiving documents relating to Horizon into 1999. Do you remember that at all?
This is something I've said to you already. I think late 99 was probably when I left the project, maybe just early 2000, yes.
Thank you.
I saw my name on several documents in 99, so yeah.
You said in your statement that your role was to agree a training course with ICL Pathway for 70,000 people.
Yeah, not one training course, a number of different training courses for 70,000 people in total. Yeah.
And did that cover, for example, managers, assistants, counter clerks? Was it a broad range?
Oh, absolutely. It covered auditors, investigation, trainers, postmasters, branch managers, counter clerk. It covered a whole range of different people within the business.
I want to start today with an overview of your concerns that you've expressed in your witness statement regarding the training that was available. You've made very clear in your statement that although you considered user awareness events to have been excellent, you consider that the training itself should have been longer. Can you summarise for us what made you reach that conclusion?
You've got 70,000 people. They're not all the sub-posters, but you've got an age range of 87 down to 16. You've got those people who've never used technology. You've got those people who feared technology, those people who embraced technology. So you had a whole range of people. And whatever you try and do, and I did hear someone say about trying to profile the resource that we had, and that would just have been impossible to try and profile our resource. You were going to have people on these courses who had IT knowledge, who were trained by the post office, and you're going to have postmasters and their staff on the same course. And it was going to cause problems because they work at different speeds. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I know that we ended up, because I came to an impasse with my opposite number in Pathway, because they wanted to do just a one-day course. And
can you tell us, just pausing there, who was your opposite number?
At the time, it was a lady called Lorraine Holt, and then it became Andy Barkham. I think it was Andy Barkham who took over after she moved.
And can you tell us what was their view as to the length of time that was appropriate for a training?
At the time, they obviously wanted to start with workbooks sent out, so distant learning, that was never going to work. And then they came back to me, the final offer, as it was then, was for one day for all sub-postmasters, branch managers and counter assistants. And I just wouldn't agree it. And it came to an impasse that we had to call a meeting between Douglas Craig, Bruce McNiven and myself from Post Office Counters. Liam Foley, Lorraine Holt, Barry someone was there, and I think the managing director of ICL Pathway came along. And at the end of that meeting, we had to come up with a solution to move forward on how long we were going to have to train. My view was that sub-postmasters needed at least 2 days. The second half should have been working on the cash account, error reversals, etc., etc. But at the end, we had to reach a compromise, and we accepted that 1.5 days was what we had to work with for branch managers and sub-postmasters, and 1 day for counter clerks. Now, if you ask me today, I think Bruce was right in saying that 1 day for assistants was enough. 1.5 days for branch office staff was enough, but 1.5 days for postmasters was not enough. And they should have had the extra half day doing more cash account work.
Can you give us an indication of when this discussion took place?
I can't remember exactly when it took place now.
I'll take you through some documents, and if while I'm taking you through those documents that gives you a better indication of the period of time, please do say so.
Well, it was certainly before Caritas were involved in terms of the training, because they were waiting for the outcome of how long they would have to build the training around. I can't honestly remember exactly when it was.
Can you tell me how high up within the post office you raised concerns about the length of training?
Certainly to my deputy director level.
And who was that?
That was Bruce McNiven. And Douglas Craig as well. You know, I raised it with them.
And what was their response?
My main concern about the lack of cash account training was the knock-on effect of when we went into a live environment on transactional TIP, I think it was called, in Chesterfield, and all the cash accounts going there, and the obvious increase in error notices. You know, I could see that was going to happen, but it was very difficult to get my point of view over.
You've said at paragraph 59 of your witness statement that you were outvoted. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Well, Bruce and Douglas, they were my senior managers, and they said, well, we would work with 1.5 days. And, you know, I wasn't going to go against them. I had to agree with them. So we did. And we had to build a course the best we could for 1.5 days and 1 day.
And what do you recall of the view of ICL or Peritas at that time regarding the length of training?
Well, ICL, obviously, we're not happy to have to extend it. It could be an additional cost to them. Peritas didn't quite know what that time was going to be anyway. It wasn't until we passed that information that we were going to try and build these courses up between 1.5 days and 1 day that they actually got really involved in the detail of the courses.
Going to move on to the issue of feedback, you've also made clear in your witness statement at paragraph 73 that you didn't think that the Post Office were bothered listening to sub-postmasters. Why did you think that was?
Bothered? Can you quote that?
Absolutely. If we could bring your witness statement on screen and we can have a look at paragraph 73. Thanks. It's page 23. And if we scroll down to paragraph 73. Thank you. You say there, I've been asked what the Post Office did with feedback obtained from the sub-postmasters. The answer is not a lot. This is my opinion because the training programme wasn't changed. I don't think we bothered listening to the sub-postmasters, to be honest. They were asked to give feedback at the end of the course, which went to ICL Pathway/Peritas, but it was irrelevant what they said, as nothing was done with it, and the training course wasn't going to change.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they all completed feedback forms at the end of the course, but I don't think, certainly in Post Office, I don't recall us doing anything with the feedback, and we certainly didn't modify the course after it was initially signed off. Not to my knowledge. It might have changed after I left, but up until I had left, we still had the same course that we signed off.
And how did you feel about that at the time?
My honest opinion is, what's the point in having a feedback form if you don't actually take notice of what's being said? Sometimes what was said you couldn't have changed anyway, but sometimes there may have been some relevant points, like we need some more time on cash account training.
I'm going to take you through some documents chronologically, and as I say, if that jogs your memory in terms of the various discussions that you had, please do let me know. The first document I'm going to take you to is from the 7th of January of 1999, and that is Pol 000397949. Thank you very much. This is a letter from, or a note from Bruce McNiven to RGMs. Can you tell us who RGMs were?
Yeah, the regional general managers.
And what was the role of a regional general manager?
There were 7 of them across the country, and they looked after the whole network of post offices within their catchment area. They were the top man or woman in the region. Thank
you. You're copied into this note. Is this something you remember? I'm going to read to you the first 2 paragraphs. I'll read the paragraphs and you can let me know if you recall this issue. So it starts to say, training courses for 64,000 of the 72,000 target audience have been agreed in principle. This includes the manager's course, which will be aimed at branch managers and sub-postmasters, together with other staff who complete the cash account, and the basic training course for sub-office assistants. Currently, however, we have not reached agreement on how to deliver training to an estimated audience of approximately 8,000, comprising at least 6,500 counter clerks and upwards of 1,600 franchise staff who operate Echo Plus. Clearly, the training is not aimed at teaching people how to complete a cash account, which is an assumed competence of those attending the courses, but the conversion to the automated version is more complex than originally envisaged. The gap is approximately 2 hours of training, which cannot be added to the one-day event. Is this a discussion that you remember at all?
No, I don't. Absolutely not.
The reference there to the automated version being more complex than originally envisaged, is that something that you remember?
No.
Not as expressed in this particular note, but in general, was it that the automated version was more complex than you or your colleagues originally thought it was going to be?
I don't believe it was. No, I really don't. And I'm looking at this now, the second half of the first paragraph. Currently, however, we have not reached agreement on how to deliver training to an estimated audience of 8,000, comprising of at least 6,500 counterclass and up to of 1,600 franchise. Well, that's not true. It was the same course as what all branch managers and sub-postmasters and all counterclass had.
So might it have been that in January of 1999, formal agreement hadn't been reached as far as counterclerks and franchise staff were concerned?
But they weren't treated separately. They were all treated as part of, it's 70,000 actually, not 72, because 72 was the target for user awareness. It was 70,000 for the training. But they were all treated the same. I don't remember seeing this document, this letter, even though I was copied in on it.
Thank you. If we scroll down, it talks about different alternatives that could be undertaken by counterclerks. One option being that they attend the manager's course, and it has various concerns there and costs. If we scroll down, it has another option, 8,000 individuals attending a one-day course, etc., and it gives a costing there. This gives various costings throughout this document. Not basing your recollection on this document at all, but just in general, to the best of your recollection, to what extent did the cost of training impact on the amount of time that was agreed?
I think you need to ask ICL Pathway that, because that obviously being a private financial initiative, it would be a cost to them.
So was the cost a concern for the post office at all, to the best of your recollection?
No, not to my knowledge. Not a cost that was delivered by ICL Pathway, no.
So if it didn't impact the post office on cost, why was there resistance to extending the time period for training to 1.5 days?
Because it impacted ICL Pathway, not the post office. We would like to have had, I'm sure if we could have got 4 days, 5 days training, we'd have happily had that. But obviously, if it's a private finance initiative, you have to listen to what your partner's saying.
So if you were raising with Bruce McNiven and others, for example, that you thought it should be 1.5 days, why did you understand there to have been resistance on the post office side to extending the training?
I don't believe there was resistance on the post office side, really.
So, to the best of your recollection, why didn't the post office push for more training?
Well, I did. But we had to compromise at a meeting, otherwise we'd never move forward with a training programme. So that's what we came to. I came to that impasse with Pathway, and that's why that meeting was held, to find an agreeable way forward. Whether it's the right way or not, it's debatable, but we had to come to some agreement to work with to get the course moving.
Thank you. So where you say you were overruled by those senior to you or outvoted, etc., is it that they were seeking to agree a compromise, whereas you wanted what you considered to be the best solution?
I think so. I think they were looking at some way of moving this forward. And as I said earlier, I do believe that they probably got the majority of that decision right. The part that they never got right, in my opinion, was we should have given sub-postmasters a separate extra half a day on cash account. But that wasn't to be.
I'm going to move on a couple of months to March 1999, and can we look at poll 000-39733? Thank you very much. If we can go over the page, please. Were you aware of ICL Pathway receiving feedback during this period? I think this is a document that you saw in preparing your witness statement.
Yeah, no, they would have got feedback, definitely.
Were you aware at the time that this feedback was taking place?
Yes, yeah.
There are, in this document, concerns raised about the lack of training in respect of balancing and also insufficient time being allocated to training. I'd like to just give you a flavour of that. I think you have had an opportunity to look at this, but let's just look at page 12 just to give a flavour. This is an event that took place on the 8th and 9th of March involving Birmingham counter managers. And I'll just read the first few entries there. If we could scroll down slightly. The first one refers to stock units, more time. Then it says, concerned I feel if you're not careful in the accounting aspects of Horizon, you might feel yourself in trouble. You need to know what you're doing. More time needed on the balancing procedure, sped through a lot of information and the course quite intense. Balancing, more time. Pretty confident with day-to-day work and procedures, still confused over the balance in relation to comparing what I do at present, etc. Were those issues being communicated to you by ICL at that time?
Yeah, we met quite often, but Birmingham counter managers. Now, I'm assuming from that you mean they're post office trained managers?
So, no, if we look back at the beginning of this document, page 2, this was the trial of the training. It was involving the first 14, and there was a group, there were different groups around the country that ICL looked at training and receiving feedback on. So that is the feedback that was provided by some Birmingham training.
Yeah, but I'd need to know a breakdown of who those people were, because I'd be very surprised if they were Echo Plus trained branch managers who were finding it difficult to operate the Horizon system. Very surprised.
So,
it may have been sub postmasters. Maybe if that's them passing the comment, then I understand that.
yes. So these are counter managers in Birmingham, and you find that surprising?
If they're post office employees, I do. Yeah.
If they were sub-postmasters, if the training was for sub-postmasters in the early days of Horizon, and the feedback was that the length of time taken is insufficient, and that there is insufficient training with regards to balancing, would that have surprised you?
No,
not?
it wouldn't have surprised me.
Was it consistent with your own experience?
Yes, absolutely.
2 months later, we have something that we know as Acceptance Incident 218. In your statement, I think you've said you can't remember very much about that incident, but I'll take you to a document to see if it brings back any particular memories.
Okay.
That's POL 000-90478. And can we look, please, at page 4 of that? So this describes Acceptance Incident 218, and it has a date observed there in the right-hand corner as the 19th of May 1999. And the description of that incident is as follows. It says, the manager's training course is not acceptable due to deficiencies in the accounting modules. In the live environment, the training given did not equip the users to perform the completion of Office cash accounts. This is a I think it means basic POCL function that is central to running and accounting for the POCL network. So this is the Post Office raising with ICL an acceptance incident that is essentially saying that in the live environment, the training given didn't equip users to perform the completion of cash office accounts. Is that something that you remember? Even if you don't remember the particular nuances of Acceptance Incident 218?
Possibly. It's very difficult to remember. This was was this live trial or?
This would have been, yes, there would have been a relatively small number of outlets that had received Horizon by this time in May 1999.
Yeah, I really can't recollect that at all. I know that when we did model office testing, any issues that came up, corrective action was taken to ensure that we did have sufficient time. Well, not sufficient time, but we did cover how to produce a cash account. But no, I can't remember this.
No. If we turn perhaps to page 7 of this document, we see there a letter to John Dix of ICL Pathway from Bruce McNiven, and it concerns a review of Acceptance Incident 218. And if we
Right.
move on to page 11, sorry, yes, yes, he has highlighted there certain concerns that still exist as of the date of his letter. So his letter there is the 10th of August 1999, and I'm just going to read to you this paragraph. It says, although the small sample size of 18 responses limits the validity of the findings, some significant improvements were found in comparison to live trial 1. Overall, attitudes towards Horizon are better at the LT2 offices compared to the LT1 experience. So that gives you an indication of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The key outstanding issues to emerge from research were as follows, and it lists there: the course is still considered to be too short and intensive. ICL have proposed a pre-training course, but details are awaited. The need to further stream the training groups. This issue has not been addressed by Pathway beyond the streaming required by POCL for Echo Plus staff. Pathway's response is to do wherever possible. There are impacts on the number of training places. The next entry, variation in trainer quality, discussions taking place between POCL and ICL Pathway to look at how there can be a greater quality assurance for trainer ability and consistency of delivering the course specification. There are significant problems with technical and software faults in the training sessions. POCL regard these as significant issues which will require rectification. Were those concerns that you recall at all?
All valid points. I recall all of those points. And I remember listening to Kevin Fletcher say that they had somewhere in the region of 250 trainers coming out. And I went to many training courses, and we were not happy with a number of their trainers. And this was passed on to Pathway. And I believe that Pathway did speak to Peritas, and either more training was given to those trainers or they were removed from the program. As for ICL have proposed a pre-training course, that's new to me. I don't remember ICL proposing a pre-training course. But details are awaited, so maybe they didn't pursue that.
If we look at that first bullet point and that first sentence, the course is still considered to be too short and intensive. In the summer, so August 1999, was that a view that you shared?
Absolutely. My view never changed from when we agreed to go towards the 1.5 days. All we could do, as my team could do, is to make sure that I basically say crammed as much information as we could into the time we had.
If we go over the page, this is a response to Bruce McNiven from John Dix in August, the 11th of August 1999. I won't spend much time on it because you don't really recall much about the acceptance incident. Just see if this jogs any memories. This is a response that says, Pathway is convinced that that it has done everything it can to improve the training and prepare for Horizon, and that the essence of the remaining issues that you're seeking to address relate to POCL's own management of change. Moving to the next paragraph, it says, Pathway has consistently maintained that user confidence in the system will be achieved only through managing the change in POCL business processes such that POCL's target standard approach is adopted across the post office network. Next paragraph, for these reasons, Pathway believes that acceptance incident 218, which formally relates to training, should now be closed. Pathway does not accept that any further revisions to the training courses other than routine minor improvements already identified are required or indeed are now desirable in light of the commitments made by both parties to revised courses and collateral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember during this period, so the summer of 1999, there being essentially a decision that there would be no extension, for example, of time for that manager's
Absolutely.
course?
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, it was.
And can you
But
tell us?
There was lots of other things done in the interim to support the training. There was all the 8 different workbooks I think were produced, quick reference guides. We had the HFSOs there to support when they went live.
That's the Horizon Field Support.
Field Support Officer, sorry, yeah. That was the Horizon Field. And they were there, I think, for the first week, maybe the second week, certainly for 2 balances. or if needed, 3 balances. So almost like holding the hands of the sub postmasters or sub postmistresses to take them through the transition from a manual system to an automated platform. So it wasn't just about the training; it was about the support that was given post training.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was your view that despite that additional support, there still should be an extension in the manager's training?
Yeah, I still believe that. But to be fair, there were sub postmasters who went on that course and had no problems with going back to their office, using training mode, practicing in the time before they had to do a life balance. There were some sub postmasters who just didn't want change, and it was never going to work in their offices. It was very difficult times. But some postmasters cope, but everybody seems to concentrate on those that struggled. So I don't know. I don't know what more we could have done in terms of support of that network there.
Other than extend the time for training?
But even so, we could have extended it another half a day or a day and a half, and there have still been sub postmasters that wouldn't have been able to balance.
Can we look at poll 000284441, please? We're moving now to the end of 1999, early 2000. Now, I know that you are likely to have left, certainly, well, by January 2000.
Yeah.
But let's have a look at this document. Can we look at page 3? This was a research project that took place in Christmas of 1999, so it may be that you were around at that time, or certainly near the end of your time. Do you remember who Lorna Green was?
Never heard of her, no.
If we look over the page 4, thank you. It says, this document accompanies the report entitled Christmas Horizon Research, January 2000 by Lorna Green. The report discusses the results of a telephone questionnaire carried out in December 1999 with a sample of 335 national rollout post offices and asked questions about various aspects of the Horizon programme. Was this a project that you were aware of before you left at all?
No. Never heard of Christmas Horizon Research at all.
Were you, during your period of involvement, aware of any research projects other than the first one that I took you to? In fact, that was carried out by ICL. Any research projects that were undertaken by the Post Office to get substantive feedback from sub-postmasters and others using the Horizon system?
I know there was, but I can't tell you who done them or when they were done. There certainly was. I would have thought perhaps our national training team may have done some research into how it was rolling out, but I can't remember who.
If we turn to page 14 of this document, this addresses training, and this provides some of the feedback from those who took part in the survey. The first heading there is not enough training. I won't read them all to you, but I'll read to you the first few. One respondent said there wasn't enough training. Another said on the course we were booked to go together and didn't get the appointment. We needed much more training and more time. Balancing needs looking at. It was completely inadequate. Day and a half was not enough, especially training for balancing was concerned. I'm used to computers, but some of the training was horrendous. Good, but not enough. I only got 1.5 days training. That again refers back to what the beginning of your evidence today about the 1.5 days. We needed more training. It was too rushed. If we turn over the page, there's another section of feedback which talks about not enough training on balancing. Again, I won't read them all, but I'll just read the first few. It says training for accounting was very bad. Balancing took hours to sort out and was kept up until midnight sometimes. Tried to call help desk, but it was almost always engaged, but needed more time on balancing. The first day was all right, but the quality of training was not good on the second day. The next person said, because we concentrated on serving customers, which was very easy, but needed training on balancing in back office, I think it was useless. Next, inadequate, particularly for balancing. And then if we turn over the page, not enough time allowed. It was trying to cram too much in, not enough time. inadequate day and a half was not long enough, no time to practice anything. It could ideally have been a longer training session. We ended up being left totally confused. There was not enough time, not long enough, etc. Although that you didn't see this document at the time and weren't part of this research, are those consistent with your recollections and the concerns that you had at the time?
I think it's perfectly exactly what I thought. You know, I think there's a lot of what you've got to realise. These comments that people are making here, they could have practiced if they'd gone into training mode when they got back to their office, and they could have practiced, made their mistakes then. So there was additional support if they could be bothered to use the training mode. But no, those comments, I'd probably agree with most of them.
To summarise where we're up to now, you've given evidence about your opinion that there was insufficient time for training or that you wanted an extra half a day. We've seen the feedback that talks about insufficient time and a lack of balancing and cash account training. You have that note from Bruce McNiven about the complexity of conversion to the new system. And you have the acceptance incident 218 being raised. What I'd like to ask is why, during your period of involvement, weren't those concerns about the length, including your concerns about the length of the training, taken seriously by the Post Office?
I have no idea. I mean, I used to go up to Chesterfield and speak with the tip people to try and pre-warn them about the error rates that were going to increase. And I spoke to all my people in the Post Office that I knew and tried to look at the downstream effects. But perhaps it wasn't me. Perhaps I wasn't strong enough in trying to put my opinions over. But yeah, I could see all those comments happening. I really could.
Would it have been easy to add half a day more training or a day's more training on?
Probably not. We could have separated it, but it would have been a bit of a logistical nightmare for them, because as soon as they finished the training, the Post Office, the Paratest trainers would pack up all the equipment, get ready to move on to the next venue where they were holding training, and reset all that up for the following courses. But if we'd have programmed it right, yeah, we could have done it. We could have an extra half day, no problem.
Thank you. I'd like to look at FUJ 00001356. This is the counter manager's course specification, and it has their status approved. Your name does appear there in the distribution list towards the bottom there. Can we scroll down slightly? So the distribution list there includes people from ICL Pathway, people from Post Office Counters Limited, and also people from Knowledge Pool. Is this a document that you remember at all?
Not particularly, no, but I know the author was Andy Barkham, who was my opposite number, so I'm sure I must have seen it.
If we turn over the page, it has the document history there, and I'm just going to read to you what it says about version 2.0. It says, contains amendments made following evaluation exercise in July 1999. Document is based on the courses presented as dry runs to Post Office Counters Limited and signed off by Trevor Rollason in September 1999. Do you remember the evaluation exercise? Do you remember signing it off?
No, I don't.
We have at 0.2 there the approval authorities, and we have Andy Barkham of ICL Pathway. We have yourself from the Post Office, and we have Stuart Kearns from Knowledge Pool. So can I just understand what an approval authority was? Does that mean that all three of you agreed this document?
I believe so, yes.
And was that generally routine for these kinds of things, that the three different parties would agree the specifications?
We wouldn't sign off unless all three of us agreed that it was the right thing to do, yeah.
What I want to understand, this is the document that sets out what the counter manager's course is going to involve. If we look at, say, page 4, it gives the introduction. This document contains the course specification to be used by knowledgeable trainers, etc. It is why, despite the concerns that you had at the time, you approved this particular document. You've given evidence before about being outvoted. Is this an example where you were told to approve it rather than...
Absolutely. This would have been the outcome of our first meeting we had with Pathway when we had the impasse. This would be what I had to work within, the boundaries I had to work within.
So, although we see your name as the approval authority, in truth, who would you say was the approver?
Well, it would probably be my direct boss, Douglas Craig.
I'd like to move on to several discrete topics now, and I won't be particularly long. Chair, I don't think we need a break this afternoon. If you're happy...
No. That's fine.
I think you have Mr. Rollason's view of that, Mr. Blake. So
Sorry about that.
I'm quite happy for us to continue until Mr. Rollason has finished his evidence, subject only to thinking of the transcriber as well, that's all.
I think the transcriber is happy to have an early Friday afternoon.
Then we're all happy, Mr. Blake.
Thank you. Can we look at FUJ 00001322, please? And that is the training program, training needs analysis. And we have you there on the distribution list. This is version 2.0, and it's dated July 1999. There are earlier versions of this dating back to 1997 that we have, and it's the same point that's contained throughout multiple versions of this document that I'd like to take you to. And it's page 5, which lists the objectives. But just before we get to page 5, sorry, if we just look at page 2, it has again there approval authorities, and we have the same ICL, TS. Sorry, are you aware of TS?
No.
Right. So it's part of ICL pathway, and then you have POCL. So you have the three approval authorities for this document, very consistent with what you've told us about requiring multiple approval authorities. It's page 5, which has the objective of training. I'm just going to read this out. So it says ICL Pathway have contracted ICL TS Limited to provide the training program. So this was one of the, I think Peritas had multiple different names over the years.
Yeah, so this is Peritas we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. To provide the training program in support of the POCL counter-automation project. The training program is required by ICL Pathway to meet the following objectives. Compatibility. The program must be managed and delivered in a manner consistent with the implementation program undertaken by ICL Pathway Limited and their other subcontractors. Timeliness. No individual is to be trained more than 5 working days prior to the automation of their normal counter position. To the required scope, which is, and this is the part in bold, to ensure that all staff who work within a post office are competent in the use of the automated platform, are aware of the impact on operational procedures caused by the introduction of the platform, and that specialist staff are provided with the appropriate additional information to perform their job role within an automated post office. It then goes on to say, achieve appropriate competence levels. The delivered program is required to ensure that 95% of personnel have a minimum competence, that they are capable of processing 90% of all transactions undertaken by their base office correctly. Do you remember this objective at all?
Yes, yeah, I remember this document. This was like the Bible, to be quite honest.
Are you able to assist us with those figures at the bottom there? So the delivered program is required to ensure that 95% of personnel have a minimum competence, that they are capable of processing 90% of all transactions. How was that monitored?
We actually introduced a competency test didn't like the name competency test, and listened to Bruce's statements yesterday or the day before, it was changed to the certificate of competence, and it was measured against that. Processing of 90% of all transactions, I'm not quite sure how we measured that, but 95% of the personnel had to pass the competency test to obtain their certificate of competency to go back to work in a live environment. That was measured by Pathway Peritas's trainers. And if they failed to reach the required standard, they were invited back for another training course. If they failed again, they become the responsibility of post office counters to finish off their training. That's about what I remember of that part of it. But we were heavily involved, myself and Anne Green were heavily involved in developing this competency test, along with Catherine Cook, to make sure that, you know, the counter class could do the basic things like switch the computer on, log in, do a sale of stamps and multiple transactions, post savings bank. So they could do the whole range of business that they could actually do. And at the end of the day, do the end of the day requirements as well. So yeah, it was that was measured by the Peritas trainers.
Do you consider that the competency testing sufficiently focused on balancing, or was it more focused on those inputting type tests that you've just described?
It did concentrate on balancing, obviously, but probably not enough. It certainly was enough for the basic one-day course. It wasn't overly difficult, I don't think, the one-day course. The 1.5-day course was obviously more difficult with the balancing aspects, and they would have had to achieve a balance to have passed the competency test. Yeah.
But you've expressed views about the length of that course. In terms of the difficulty of the course testing competency when it came to balancing, if there wasn't sufficient training in relation to those issues, did that impact in some way on how difficult or rigorous or stringent the competency test would be when it came to issues such as balancing?
Well, I can't remember what we put on the second part of that course in terms of competency. But they would have had to have achieved a balance to have been classed as competent to go back to their office.
If we look at the figures there, 95% have to have a minimum competence. Do you know what happened to the 5% who didn't, who failed?
They became our post office counters' responsibility to continue their training. And that would have been the responsibility of the sub-postmaster, probably.
And the 90% there of transactions that need to be correct, was that in any way an acknowledgement that it was unlikely that 100% of transactions would be correct?
I mean, the post office did so many different transactions. You'd need a week to train someone on all the different transactions that we did. So you could only cover as much as we could cover. And they were all the main transactions that you would have done, like a gyro bank, deposit, withdrawal, savings banks, deposit, withdrawal. All the main transactions that you normally would perform would have been covered in that competency test.
Thank you. If we scroll down, we have the population to be trained there, and it starts with postal officers, branch managers, etc. It has also auditors and post office security.
Yeah.
Do the concerns that you've raised regarding the managers' training extend to the training of the auditors and the post office security?
No.
And why not?
Because we had auditors were certainly involved in developing the course, as were, you haven't got on there, our investigation departments. That was also on there. So we knew all their requirements. I can't remember the length of their courses, but they were happy with the length of the course that we gave them. Our post office security is probably the information department, investigation department trainers. Yeah, no, we didn't have any other problems with the length of courses for those outside of the core number that needed doing.
Thank you. If we could take that down. I'm going to ask you now about fraud investigations, and that's something that you've mentioned in your statement. Can we look at your statement at paragraph 21, please? Thanks. That should be page 7. Thank you. If we could enlarge paragraph 21, and I'll just read that out. It said, I spent a lot of time with Judy Land to sort incorrect and incomplete cash accounts and the problems it would cause. Pausing there, who was Judy Land?
She was the head of our finance in Chesterfield. She looked after all the reconciliation of the accounts.
Thank you. You say she was the head of group in the finance division and looked after the cash and reconciliation accounts.
Yeah.
I forewarned her of problems when the first lot of cash accounts came in. Some didn't balance and others hadn't been completed correctly. I also spent time with the fraud department to discuss the problems and fraud that may happen with automation. That was a big concern. Can you give us an indication of the typical problems that were experienced with the cash and reconciliation accounts?
Well, you've already mentioned that some people were there to 11 at 12 at night trying to balance their accounts. There's others come 9 o'clock on Thursday morning that still hadn't reconciled their accounts, but they had to open their office and go live. So they were sending accounts that didn't actually balance up to Chesterfield. And Chesterfield then would have to try and balance their accounts, try and find out where any errors were. And this increased the number of error notices significantly. And it was something, it was obvious it was going to happen.
You said there in paragraph 21 that you forewarned the head of the group finance division. What was the purpose of forewarning? Was it for them to go easy on sub-postmasters?
No, certainly not. To ensure they've got sufficient staff to unravel some of the problems that were going to occur. And I remember vividly, there was a sub-postmistress down in Oxfordshire. She was in her 80s. And myself and Anne Green had to go down to her office and unravel the accounts that she got into. It took us nearly a day to reconcile what she got left in there. And so there was going to be problems. We knew there were going to be problems. And it was just to forewarn them that to expect a bigger workload than what, until they got used to it and then what they would initially be getting. So.
Thank you. Having left in 1999, you weren't around to see whether the amount reduced or not, is that?
No, I wasn't around. No. I hope it did.
Were potential bugs, errors or defects in the Horizon system discussed with the finance division?
I didn't discuss them with them, no.
Was it in your mind at all at the time?
No. I mean, we were hearing the problems that they were having with her, right? In the outlets, like screens would freeze, printers wouldn't print out, barcode scanners wouldn't scan. They'd have a power surge and something would happen with the system. So we were aware that there was problems with the hardware in particular and possibly the software. But that was all.
You said you spent time with the fraud department. Was that the fraud department within the post office? Was that the security team or was it something else?
Both. The fraud was with the benefit agency in the early stages and looking at the issues. And then we also spoke to the investigation team to find out what they needed to understand about interrogating the system and developing a course that suited their requirements. So there was a specific course for them.
And what did you understand their role to be in connection with
investigation
Horizon?
people?
Yeah.
Well, they go in when there's a large loss, and they should go in and try and find out what's wrong with the system or what's wrong with the accounts.
And the problem that you've described, having discussed with the group finance division, were those discussions you also had with that team?
Possibly, I can't remember. I would have thought so.
Who in particular in that team would you have spoken to, or who was your main contact or main contact?
I don't know. It was There was auditors from head office. There was local auditors involved in developing their course, and I would imagine there was the same with the investigation departments. There was headquarters investigation team and local investigators to tell us what they needed, because we didn't know exactly what they required, and we worked with them.
Can you remember any names of any individuals that you discussed those problems with the cash and reconciliation accounts with in Chesterfield or elsewhere?
Well, obviously there was Judy Land, and we had many meetings in different people from Chesterfield's a huge place, and we'd have many meetings from different departments just to explain to them where we were within it, how we were developing the system. But no, I can't remember anybody else, mainly Judy Land.
Was your impression or your knowledge that those kinds of issues were known higher up the chain in post office management at all?
If they weren't, they should have been.
And looking back, do you think they were?
That's difficult to say. Difficult to say.
Maybe difficult, but should we give it a go?
Yeah, I'm sure some of the senior managers knew that the problems were going to be experiencing at Chesterfield. Yeah.
Moving on to the workbooks that you mentioned, can we look at FUJ 00117722, please? This is a training workbook. It's number 8 of 10. Is this document familiar to you at all?
Yes.
Do you remember the training workbooks?
I remember there was 8. There was EPOS, BES, OBCS. There was all different categories. And I think there was an interview on this morning where the lady said, if you actually went through these documents, these workbooks stage by stage, you could actually do the job.
It was hundreds of pages long in total.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's pages and pages of it.
Can you remember when these were given to sub-postmasters, whether it was before the training, after the training?
Do you know what? I was trying to think that today, whether they were given at the training or whether they were at the outlet when they got back, and I honestly can't remember.
If we turn over the page, I think you saw Mr. Fletcher's evidence. They were produced by Knowledge Pool.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember who produced them or who inputted into them at all?
Well, the input would have been from our team, from Peritas.
So it would have been a joint document?
Absolutely, yeah. It would have been, yeah. We would have to had an input into all of those books.
Thank you. Can we look at page 11? So this is the training workbook 8, which addresses help and basic maintenance on the Horizon system.
Yeah.
If we look at page 11, at the top, it says occasionally things may go wrong with the Horizon system, or you may need help with a particular process or procedure. This section explains the help functions available. If the failure occurs on any part of the Horizon system, you must telephone the Horizon system help desk. And if we look over the page, you may recall I took Mr. Fletcher to this. It says, if you have a failure of the complete system or one of its components, these are the procedures to adopt. And then it talks about power failures, touchscreen failures, card reader failures, etc. And for each of those entries, ultimately, it says call the Horizon system help desk. I think you've said in paragraph 50 of your evidence that where there is a discrepancy, the sub-postmaster had the helpline available. Was the helpline seen as where postmasters and assistants and others should turn to if there are, for example, software issues and discrepancy issues?
Yeah, I think the helpline was the first point of call. I heard someone say that it was very difficult to get through to the helpline. If you couldn't get through to the helpline, then you obviously had the workbooks that you could look refer to. There was quick reference guides I saw back there, and there was other ways. And also, I know a lot of them actually contacted fellow sub-postmasters and spoke to them and said, I've got this problem, have you experienced it? And they networked between them. But the helpline was there. The helpline was very good.
we spoke at the beginning and throughout your evidence about needing a bit more time doing the training. Do you think that there was too heavy a reliance on the help desk to make up for any inadequacies in the training?
Well, it wasn't just the help desks that were there. Don't forget the Horizon field support officers were there, and they were there for at least the first week, second week, maybe even third week of balancing. So they were there. They were the first line. Physically, they were there to help and build the confidence. It's probably when they left that most of it went then to the Horizon System help desk. Was there too much? I don't know. It must have been, I suppose, if they couldn't get through to it.
To give you an example, if we look at poll 000090478, which is a document we've looked at earlier, that this is the acceptance incident document. And if we look at page 9, thank you. If we look at the left-hand side, it's talking about inadequacies in training, and it says the consequences are also that the number of cash account related incidents reported to POCL NBSC is considerably greater than expected. About a third of the calls coming to NBSC help desk indicate a lack of understanding of the cash accounting and balancing process. Horizon System Help Desk are responsible for resolving these service incidents, but are unable to cope with the contents and volumes of calls, which are therefore having to be dealt with by NBSC. As the manager's training course is deficient, NBSC and presumably Horizon System Help Desk staff who receive this training course are also inadequately trained. Would you agree with that?
No. I don't see how you can relate the two. Horizon is that HS Horizon Help Desk, is that?
Yes. So I think the suggestion there is that the help desk staff receive the same training and therefore are as inadequately trained as the sub-postmaster's assistants.
I don't recall, but I doubt very much if the help desk staff received the same training course as the sub-postmasters. I would have thought they would have received more training.
And in respect of the sub-postmasters and assistants and others, do you think that the insufficient, in terms of time allocated to training for balancing, impacted on the help desks because those sub-postmasters were having difficulty balancing the cash accounts, etc.?
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly.
Thank you. You can take that then. Thank you, Mr. Rollason. I don't have any further questions. I'm going to look around the room just to see. But yes, thank you. Mr. Whittam from Fujitsu has some questions.
Just some very short ones in relation to your statement, if I may. If that could come up on the screen, please. WITN 05240-100. And if we could go to page 13, please. This is just to put it into context. This is the passage. If we scroll to the bottom, please. It's in the passage dealing with Horizon Training and Competencies Development Group. So that's just to put it into context. And if we go over, please, to page 15, it's paragraph 46. I'd just like you to help us with, please. You'd been talking there in the previous paragraph, just above it, about the entry-level competencies of the SPMs coming onto the course. And then in paragraph 46, you say that the POCL staff weren't a problem. Who would you include in the POCL staff there, just to help us understand?
Directly employed staff that work for the post office.
Thank you. And you carry on. However, once you went live, any new staff employed by the SPMs were trained by the SPMs, not POCL.
That's correct.
And was there any difference in the training before it went live than after it went live as to who was responsible, as far as you understood?
The sub-postmaster was always responsible for training any new members of staff that he or she took on board. Pockle were responsible for training any new sub-postmasters that came on.
Thank you. And you make the observation that diluted the quality of the training, presumably because it was being then second-hand, not from a trainer, but from somebody who'd been trained.
Correct.
And you thought that this was another area of risk that you raised with Douglas Craig and with Bruce McNiven. But there wasn't a solution we could afford to do. Is that Pockle affording to do it?
Yes.
And as you've already indicated to us, you just had to accept that there would be mistakes made by these people. You don't know how Pockle became aware of this issue, but we all knew about these issues. So common knowledge there were going to be errors.
Yeah, I mean, I was an ex-area manager, so there was mistakes in a manual environment. So it was fairly obvious to all of us that there was going to be more mistakes in an automated environment to start with anyway. And then when you take on new staff, not only have they got to learn how to do the transaction and understand the transaction, but they've got to learn how to use the Horizon platform as well. So inevitably there will be more mistakes until they get the experience not to make the mistakes.
Thank you. And if we could go to page 17, please, just at the top, paragraph 50. And you touched on this in one of your previous answers, that you'd been asked what you thought an SPM ought to be able to do at the time once they noticed a discrepancy between the Horizon generated data and the actual cash and stock in the branch. And you described to us having the helpline available. There were obviously discrepancies on the old paper system before Horizon came in.
Correct.
Were sub-postmasters, both before and after Horizon came in, warned or trained as to the implications of a cash account error or a discrepancy error? Was that just common knowledge?
It was part, I'm sure it was, please don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it was part of the contract that if a sub-postmaster incurred a loss, it was his responsibility to make good that loss. And likewise, if he made a profit, which very rarely happened, he could take that or she could take that money out. As an area manager, my advice to all my sub-postmasters was, if you've got a loss, record the date, make the loss good, but wait for an error notice to come back in case you've made a mistake and Chesterfield have to find that mistake. And don't take the money out, keep it separately. And if an error notice comes back, you've got the money there to put back in. But it was always the responsibility of the postmaster to make sure that his account balanced.
And if there was a particular problem or a large problem, there would be the possibility of an investigation or a prosecution.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And was that the same, as far as you understand it, the same contract that the sub-postmaster had on the paper-based system pre-Horizon and obviously post-Horizon?
I don't record anybody's telling me that sub-postmasters' contracts were changed from when they originally signed that contract.
Thank you. And if we could just go to page 22, paragraph 72 at the very bottom, please. You describe that the support that was provided after the training session, was that by the Horizon Field Support Officers?
That's correct, yeah.
And you described the help that was given. Were you aware of sub-postmasters raising issues with the Horizon Field Support Officers about problems with balancing?
Yes, absolutely. They even raised them with us, myself, when we went to user awareness events. Some sub-postmasters who'd gone live came along to the events and said they were having a problem with the balancing.
And so being reported back, and did you report it on to other people?
I think it was just common knowledge that they were experiencing problems. I don't recall actually saying to someone, this postmaster's had a loss, but the field support officer would have been the person that was reporting to whoever their bosses were, and I can't remember what they were called. of the problems that they were having with balancing.
And it sounds like a silly question, but common knowledge within the post office.
Within the post office, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Those are the only questions I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Page has some questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rollason. I asked some questions on behalf of some of the sub-postmasters in this inquiry. And I'd like to ask you about your contact with Chesterfield that you've told us was pretty extensive during the time that you worked on Horizon. Did you stay in touch at all with people in Chesterfield?
Well, after I left?
Yes.
No.
So you don't know anything about large job losses in the 2000s?
No.
In Chesterfield? No. All right. Well, I won't ask any further questions about that then. Can I just ask this? You say in your statement that you think that glitches in the software were the root cause of the wrongful prosecutions that sub-postmasters faced.
Mm-hmm.
If you're right about that, that might explain, mightn't it, why somebody like Janet Skinner, who I represent, who was prosecuted, might be able to work with Horizon for some years before then she was subject to misbalances which led to her prosecution.
I don't know if I said that. I think I said something along the lines that Fujitsu had admitted that there were glitches in the system. I didn't know whether that was a glitch that happened in 1997 or it was a new release of software that happened between 1997 and whenever these prosecutions took place. If it took place after Horizon had rolled out, then I don't see how you can blame the initial training, etc., etc. Someone's released software in there that hasn't been tested properly. That was my concern.
So if somebody in 2006 who's been working with Horizon for some years without problems then faces problems, that does rather suggest it's the software, doesn't it?
I would have thought so.
Thank you.
It's what release, and was the release tested properly?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Unless you have any questions, Mr. Rollason, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing at all. Thank you.
Well, after a degree of difficulty in getting you equipped to give evidence, you have given evidence, and I'm very grateful for you for so doing. So thank you, Mr. Rollason.
Thank you very much.
So I won't repeat what I said about an hour and a half ago, Mr. Blake, but we're now going to have a break for a few weeks, and a new timetable will be published on Monday. That's it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Fine. All right, then. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.